Winston Churchill was known as one of the great statesmen of his time. And he faced one of the most challenging historic situations the world has ever seen. Adolf Hitler had been using the resources of his country to build an incredible military industry. He had some of the most advanced weapons of his day. Adolf Hitler's plans were to conquer the world. And he was going to do it by using a new military strategy called the Blitz, where he would take his forces and he would line them up, and with rapidity and speed never witnessed before, he would quickly move them across that foreign country using overwhelming firepower, overwhelming technology, and he would take down the opposing nation. Well known for his march through France, which literally within weeks he had conquered what we thought was an unconquerable nation, who once stood as one of the great world powers. But the nation of France fell. Great Britain, for the first time in a long time, began to see their fragility. They saw that it was possible that their great empire would fall. And so panic spread throughout the people, and the prime minister, that was Neville Chamberlain, began to fall into disfavor. And they were looking for a new leader, someone who would project power, someone who could rally the spirit of the people. Well, the Luftwaffe, that was the British Air Force, they were flying their planes and they were beginning to reach the very cities of the British people, London. And it was experiencing a bombarding unlike the world had ever seen. It happened on a nightly basis. So the morale of the people were low. They saw impending doom. And a prime minister, or at the time, an assemblyman, this is in the House of Commons, by the name of Winston Churchill, was able to make a series of speeches. And one of the speeches he made, it wasn't long. He said these words: "He who fails to plan is planning to fail. My fellow countrymen, we have no plan and we're going to lose this war." Ripples were sent throughout the Commons, and the politicians began to realize that unless they took decisive action, they may not retain their country. Winston Churchill was moved to prime minister, and he began to make a series of speeches once again to rally the people. He went to a military academy where their boys were just about to go into war against Adolf Hitler's forces. He says in his book that he really didn't know what to say. He could see in the eyes the fear of those young men, but yet so valiantly they wanted to defend their homeland. He's thought to himself, what can I tell these soldiers? What can I say to them? And so he got up in front of the crowd, and it's considered one of the shortest speeches that's ever been given. And these are the words he spoke. Never give in. Brother, our God is worthy. He doesn't just demand results, he deserves them. He is King of kings and Lord of lords. Never give up. No matter what happens, no matter what the future brings, if the church grows or it doesn't grow, I'll never give up. I'm going to continue to be in this battle for souls, regardless if it's 1, 100, or 1,000. Whoever shows up, we're going to fight. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood. It isn't a physical war. It's not a political battle. Brother, this is a spiritual conflict. It's a war over the souls of men and women. And don't you know tonight, gentlemen, that there's a war going on for Dewana? There's a battle for Billy. There's a battle for Frankie. And Satan is fighting as hard as he can to keep them. He's going to do everything in his power to keep you at home tomorrow. He's going to do everything in his power to keep you from coming. He doesn't want you to help. He wants you to be discouraged. He doesn't want you to tell the elders, listen and use me. What can I do? doesn't want you to do that. He wants you to be discouraged. He wants you to have a pity party. He wants you to think it's impossible. We can't do this. We can do it in India, but we can't do it in Grove City, Ohio. People, this is what the pride city of the nation. And there's so much immorality, and this is just not going to work. He's good at it. He's been at it for 6,000 years. He's convinced us that we can't save our family. Don't even try. You can't save your family. Don't ever try to have a Bible study with your daughter. It just doesn't work. Don't try to do a Bible study with your son because you'll run him off. Don't try to evangelize your parents because you just can't do it. Don't try to reach out to Aunt Susie. Don't reach Grandpa. You'll insult him like that. I had an 8th grade boy come up to me in Missouri. He said, Brother Rob, he said, can I talk to you? And I said, sure, son, what do you want? And he said, I want my grandpa to go to heaven. I said, well, tell me about your grandpa. Oh, you could tell the boy was close to him. They fished, they hunted together. He said, but you don't go to church, Mr. Rob. I said, go to your grandpa. And I said, tell Grandpa I love you. And Grandpa, I go to church, and I need your help, Grandpa. My church has been teaching me how to tell people about Jesus. And Grandpa, I'm supposed to practice on somebody. Can I practice on you? He said, Mr. Rob, I'm going to practice on my grandpa. 3 weeks later, he baptized his grandpa. Isn't it amazing what happens when an 8th grade boy decides he's going to get involved in evangelism? But we're convinced it doesn't work. We're convinced this is a wasted effort. Oh, it'll pass. We'll get back to normal. I hope not. If normal means we sit in our pews and we just kind of let life pass us by, I hope we never get back to normal. Brother, normal should be that we arise, we evangelize, we baptize, or you're going to fossilize. You're not going to make it. And that's where many of our churches are at. We play church. Well, gentlemen, tonight I'm talking to the men of the church, so I'm going to be straight. I'm not going to pull my punches. I'm going to speak it just like it is. Because without your help, gentlemen, without your leadership and your strength, without your willingness to step up and help, we will not win this war. We need you. The church needs you. The Lord needs you. Now's not the time to sit at home. Now's not the time to sit this one out. Now's the time to step forward and say, Mr. Jim, what can I do, Jim? Tell me. Tim, tell me what I can do. I'm here. I want to help. There's work for everyone. It says after that speech that the British boys came out of the woodwork. They said they couldn't sign them up fast enough. Everybody wanted to go to the war. Boys were pretending to be of age who were not, because I want to defend my nation. I wish we could get as excited about the Church of Christ as we do the United States of America. I mean, we get so worked up about politics and wars and rumors of wars, bombs being dropped. Israel, Iran, Ukraine, Russia, Middle East. We get riled up. We get riled up about the Republicans and the Democrats. I know they know just how to do it. When's the last time you were riled up about Jesus? When's the last time we were excited about reaching people who are lost? We get more excited about our financial investments, the Dow Jones Industrial, Bitcoin, my financial advisor. Where's my 401k? We get excited about going on our family trips. We get excited about watching the ball game. We get excited about the national championship game. I mean, it'd be the talk of the church. Brethren, it's time to talk about souls. It's time to talk about a congregational plan to reach the lost. And that's what we're going to do tonight. I'm going to talk about what can you do? What can this church do together that you can't do alone? Because the Church of Christ is not an army of one, it's an army of many. I was wondering during COVID as I sat at home and I was so discouraged. There was no church to assemble with. There was no congregating. And it was at that point I realized why the Church of Christ exists. I mean, I've always known it academically, but to know it personally. Why do we have the Church of Christ? I can worship at home. I can read my Bible at home. I can pray it. I can take the Lord's Supper at home. But you know what I can't do? You know, evangelism It takes the church of Christ. I can't fight a war alone. We need to work together. For far too long, we've said, preacher, go for it. Preacher, do it. We pay your salary, evangelize. Brethren, how's that working for the church of Christ? Not very well. And so instead of saying, preacher, get them, brethren, let's work together. There will be men in this church that are going to need your help. Because today we went out and we asked families in this area, what can we do to serve you? Some said we could have a little help with our lawn. We're older. Our lawnmower is broken. Would you mow a lawn to help us all? Some said, I need a tree that I've got a tree down in the yard. And I can't afford to have it removed. Do you mind helping me? Some said, I need a little food. Some said, I need a repair done over here in my house. Some people they have needs. And we're here to help them. We're here to show them that God loves you. And we love you too. And we're not here to solve world poverty, but we're here to show people we care. We're here to show people that just like Jesus, he fed the 5,000 in John chapter 6. And when their stomachs were full, and we know this is going to happen, a lot of them left. They just started to trickle away. And he says, well, look at them leave. And he looked at his 12 and he says, well, you also go away. And Peter said, Lord, to whom shall we go? For thou hast the words of eternal life. And we know and we are sure thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. I pray for that faith. I pray for that faith in my life and for that faith in the church of Christ. So number one, here's what we're going to do. We're going to procure our equipment. No soldier goes into war without his equipment. Helmets are needed, buckles and boots and weaponry and defensive and uniforms and rations and canteens. We need to procure the equipment. And it's obvious that this church already thought this way because you got the Bibles. You're ready. It's amazing how many people don't have a Bible. And so we're going to make sure that we have evangelism equipment. We have materials so people can go into their community and teach people. Tomorrow, Sean and John are going to take these back to the Bibles, and with lesson 1, are going to begin an important study. We hope will bring them to Christ. We need to make sure that we arm our people, that we make sure it's in their hand, that we make sure they understand what they're holding. For the church is not absent of tools. We have refrigerators and microwave and freezers and warmers and spoons and forks and knives and pepper and salt and coffee creamer, coffee grinds, coffee maker, coffee. We've got everything we need for our coffee. But sometimes I wonder, do we have what we need to reach the lost? Let's put tools into the hands of our membership. And that's the first thing you got to do. You got to equip your people. And so when they leave, they have something in their hand, an invitation card where they can invite people to come and worship. I want to show you the power of an invitation. Let's suppose tonight that we handed out a pack of 10 invitation cards to every member of this church. So Tim, would I be safe to say that you could have 175 people in the pews maybe on a Sunday morning? So let's say we handed out 175 packs of invitation cards. And someone got up, we would call that a coordinator, and he said, this is your mission this month. Every member is to pass out 10 invitations to this community this month. So if we were to have 175 members pass out 10 invitations each, how many invitations to this church would we pass out in 1 month? Help me. 1,750. How many would we have in 10 months? 17,000? In fact, how many do we have in 12 months? Well, you got to be good at math. Here's the point. Brother, can you imagine what we can do together? What I couldn't do alone? We can invite almost 2,000 people a month to church. If you invited 2,000 people a month, what are the odds that one of them might come? What do you think? One. Think about it. Just one. In fact, I know I see it all through the country. I know what's going to happen. You're going to have people come. At Glencoe, we just had a church of 45. I still remember when Karen Drenner passed out her first invitation card. I remember what happened. When that banker walked through the doors, and then her daughter walked through the doors, and we baptized, we started out just like that. I remember the naysayers saying, oh, this won't work. You can't get anybody here. They're not saying that anymore. By the way, we've gone from 45 members to 120 in 2.5 years. And I didn't do it alone. I'm never there. It's done because the members believe and they're working, and we've equipped them. We've given them invitation cards. Who can't go to a restaurant and leave an invitation card? Who can't do that? Who can't sign a card and say, hey, we'd like to have you come and see us? You know, tomorrow and Friday, we're going to be writing invite cards. We're going to send cards every day to people in this community and say, come and visit the Alkire Road Church of Christ. Come see us. Come. And you guys, I tell you, we've met a lot of people in this community that know you. And that's that church that's got that closing drive or benevolent. Yeah, that's that church that does that. And yeah, I've been there. I know about that church. Well, that's a wonderful place to be. Because that means you're building a reputation. It's so much easier to reach people when they know the kind of people you are. Step 1, equip your people. Step number 2, get your tools and put it out there where they can get them. That means you should have a table full of tools. Tools that your members can take. We call these evangelism centers. We put one in the foyer. Maybe we put one on the other side of the church. But we make sure that the members, when they're walking in and out of the church, they got a table full of tools, and all they got to do is pick it up. Whether it's a QR code to a Bible study, a door hanger, a house-to-house, heart-to-heart, a Bible study like Back to the Bible or Believe the Bible, an invitation card. But they've got something, a muscle and a shovel book. They've got something to use. Maybe Brother Tim's Bible study that he produced. Maybe an illustration to use during a study. A contact card to fill out so that we know who it is we're trying to reach. But one of the travesties that I've noticed in my ministry is that churches are quick to buy materials, but they're also quick to let it sit in the library and rot. It's been there 20 years. Let's put it out on the table and encourage our members to get it. Let's not lock it in a closet. Let's not put it in the attic. Brethren, let's put it out there where you can get it. I went to a church 2 years ago, and the church said, Rob, we're struggling. I'd been there a year before, and they had gotten all the equipment. They got everything they needed to reach the lost. I was confident that they were going to do well. After about 6 months, one of the elders called me and says, Rob, we're struggling. Could you come back and kind of get us going again? I said, well, I have one Sunday, the first Sunday in January. It's all I got next year. He said, that'd be good. So they're about an hour from the house. So I drove over there on a Sunday, and I walked in, and I looked. The first thing, I always look for one thing when I walk in. I'm looking for your evangelism table because I know you should have it set up. It's one of the very first steps you're supposed to take. I didn't see it. They got a huge foyer, but I couldn't find any evangelism. I couldn't find out where it was. So I said, well, maybe I've missed it. So I went and I did my lessons. I walked out of the auditorium. This young man, he's about 15, 16 years old. He follows me. I turned around. He said, Brother Rob, he said, do you got any of those little booklets? I said, let me see if I have them. I do. I said, yes, sir, I do. And I pulled one out. I said, what do you need? He said, could you give me a set of those? He said, I've got a friend at school, and I've been wanting to teach my friend the gospel, and I need a set of those Back to the Bible. Brethren, they had 400 sets of Back to the Bible somewhere in that church building, because that's what they got from me the last time. I said, 2 things are true here. One of the 2 is true. Either they used them all or they're in a closet. I had my suspicions. So I sat down with the elders that afternoon. They said, Brother Rob, we're really struggling. He says, could you kind of give us some indicator? What do you see here? Why are we struggling? I said, brethren, when I came last time, you guys got evangelism material. They said, yes. I said, where are they? And one of the elders looked down, and the other one looked down, and I knew what that meant. They said, Brother Rob, they said, they're in that closet over there. We haven't quite got them out yet. We're 1 year later, and they're still in the closet. I have a 16-year-old boy begging me for one set so he can conduct a Bible study. Let's put the materials out where the brethren can get them. Let's make sure our people have access to these materials so they can use them. Let's get it out of the preacher's office. Let's get it out of the secretary's office. Let's get it out of the library, and let's put it in the foyer. I went to one church, and I said, here, this is an example of what it looks like. I even have pictures just like this. I got a lot more training. And so again, I left. A few days later, the preacher calls me and says, Rob, I need you to know, I put all that evangelism material out in the foyer. Like you said, I got the tablecloth. And man, I'm excited. He said, but Rob, there's a problem. I said, what is it? He said, I came back the next day and it was gone. I said, gone? I said, well, brother, they're hungry. They're taking it. He said, oh, no, Rob, you're so optimistic. And I am optimistic. I said, well, brother, what happened? He said, well, I had a suspicion. He said, I went out to the foyer again. I put all the evangelism materials out there, and I was sure that this would be it, And I came back the next day, and they were gone. I said, brother, where is the evangelism material going? He said, well, I called one of the leaders, and I said, brother, I said, when we did this training, we agreed to put evangelism materials for the members. Where is it? He said, what do you mean? That table with all, he said, do you mean that gaudy table you put out there? Gaudy? What do you mean? He said, don't you remember, David, when we built this $2 million facility, we agreed in the bylaws that only authorized things go in the foyer. And one of the ladies went by and they saw that gaudy looking it didn't match the decor. And so they demanded it to be taken down. And we don't want to have a church split over evangelism materials, so we put it in the attic. Brethren, if you can't put evangelism materials in your foyer because it doesn't match the decor, maybe we should sell the church building and go home. This isn't the Rotary Club, and this isn't Home Interior. This is the Church of Christ. We are here to evangelize. I could tell you more stories. I thought that was a one-off. I said, surely that will never happen again, and it did. It happened twice in the same year. Unbelievable. Number 3, train people how to use it. All right, so you get your materials, you set them up, and then you train people. How many of you men have ever been to a training class at work? Raise your hand. If you've ever been to a training class, raise your hand. Just what everybody has. Tim, I know you and I preached for many years, but I can remember when I was a teenage boy, my first job was Albertsons grocery store. You ever have an Albertsons over here? Kind of like H-E-B was Texas and like a Piggly Wiggly. Y'all Piggly Wiggly? No Piggly Wiggly. Okay, well, what do y'all eat? Where do y'all get groceries here? Kroger's. Okay, Kroger's. Well, I was at the Albertsons, and they trained me how to bag groceries. I had to go to a 4 or 6 hour, I had to watch videos, and then I had to be with somebody, and they'd assign me off just to bag a grocery. I think they need to do that again. And but in any case, I can remember being trained. And training's important. Everyone in this room goes to training. Okay, let's make an application. You ready? When's the last time you went to a training class on how to approach a new mover in your community? When's the last time we went to a training class, I don't know, on how to knock a door? When's the last time we've been to a training class on how to conduct a Bible study? When's the last time we went to a training class on what to do when a visitor walks through the doors? When's the last time we went to a training class on how to pass out and where and what to say an invitation card? When's the last time we went to a training class on what to do with a new convert? When's the last time we went to a training class on how to write a card and send cards? Brethren, the point is, here's the point. We don't train our people. And if we don't train our people don't know what to do. They're good people. I know you're good people. You're here. But our people are lacking. They want to do something, but they've never been trained how to do it. I really believe if we would put some emphasis on training our members on how to do specific things, our churches would excel, just like you do at work. Number 4, we need to promote an evangelistic atmosphere in our church. We need to make sure the funnel is stuck in the top of the church. And we know that funnel says evangelism. And if it doesn't fit through the funnel, we don't do it. There's one purpose. There's one mission for the Church of Christ. I remember, brother, let me see if I can remember his name. It was Brother Jenkins, the old Brother Jenkins. He passed away years ago. Roebuck Parkway Church of Christ. And Brother Jenkins was known as a great evangelist. It was a church of 2,000. It was right around Birmingham, Alabama. And Brother Jenkins was once asked, Brother Jenkins, how have you got this church up to 2,000? He said, I caught the funnel. He says, the elders and I came to an agreement. The agreement is, if it doesn't say evangelism, we don't do it. Everything we do in this church is about reaching the lost. And so if we're going to have a graduation banquet, it's going to be about reaching the lost. If we're going to have a trunk or treat, it's about reaching the lost. If we're going to have a vacation Bible school, it's about reaching the lost. If we're going to have a teacher's appreciation day, it's about reaching the lost. If we're going to do a backpack drive, it's about reaching the lost. He said, everything we do is about reaching the lost. And then he said something else. He said, when I was preaching at that church, we never dismissed Sunday morning, Sunday night, or Wednesday night without singing the song, Lead Me to Some Soul Today. He said we sang it every time we walked out of the building. It's hard to argue with success, isn't it? It's called the funnel effect. You've got to promote evangelism through everything you do. The Carnes Church of Christ several years ago contacted us and they said, would you come and help us focus on evangelism? And I said, absolutely. So Austin and I got together and we decided that would be the spot for the American Mission Campaign. And that was in Knoxville, Tennessee. I think some of you have an attachment to Carnes through family. Tim, I think is that where your daughter attends? Is that correct? And so one of the elders said, Rob, we think that we should couple this with a backpack drive. We do one every year. I said, great. And they said, Rob, do you have any ideas of how to make a backpack drive evangelistic? I said, let me see. He said, well, when you get here, talk to the deacon of the backpacks and let's see what happens. I said, okay. We got there. We were all, that's what we promoted that week was the backpack drive. We promoted it all week. That's what we did. And so we got the backpack drive ready, and the deacon came and said, now, Rob, what do you think we should do to make this evangelistic? And I said, you tell me what you normally do. He said, well, we normally get the yellow tape and red cones out, and we have the people drive under the awning, and what we do is we kind of give people a backpack as they go under the awning and a little track about the church, and, we invite them to come. I said, how many baptisms? They said, well, we haven't had any yet. Any Bible studies? Well, not yet. Visitors? Well, not directly. I said, well, let's try this. Why don't we put the backpacks in the classrooms and require everyone to walk into your church building? And let's make sure the members are there and have an open house. Let's get the teachers in the classrooms, and let's make sure that as the people are walking in, that families introduce themselves and then give them a tour of the church building, like an open house. Make sure all the classrooms are ready, and let's make sure the teachers have the backpacks and give the students the backpacks as to where they would go if they were on Sunday morning. So take them to the class they would attend, introduce them to the teacher. Then maybe get a picture or do a fun activity. Then take them to the fellowship hall where the ladies are going to have a full meal and have a meal and eat together. And then get their contact information from a contact card, then escort them out to their car. I said, I think that would work. He said, Rob, we normally pass out about 400 or 500 backpacks on that Friday. We can't pass out 400 backpacks like that. And I said, yes, but you'll get a Bible study. I can still remember Steve Higginbotham, big old Steve Higginbotham. And he's coming down the hallway, and there's this girl right over here, and one of the members of the church said, Brother Rob, she said, she wants to have a Bible study right now. I said, Brother Higginbotham, we have a Bible study. You ought to see him light up. And he just came and he took one of the sisters, and that young lady went over to classroom number 1, and we had a Bible study right there. That's because we put the funnel in backpack drives. And so instead of the purpose being, let's pass out as many backpacks as possible, the purpose is, let's meet people, prospect people, love people, and study with people. Because if we make the work about souls and not backpacks, we might have a Bible study. But in many of our efforts, it's all about how many turkeys did you give away. I don't really care how many turkeys you gave away. I want to know how many people did we bring to Christ. Brethren, you're never going to solve world poverty here at Alkire Road. It's never going to happen. You can pass out 1,000 turkeys. They're going to be hungry next week. Jesus said the poor will always be with you. But we can teach people the gospel of Jesus. Many of our churches are engaged in a lot of good works. But just like any good CEO, at the end of the year, and you're the team leader, they're going to put you around the table. You know what they're going to ask? What'd you produce this year? Give me your bottom line. How many baptisms? How many Bible studies? How many restorations? So what is it producing? What are we getting out of it? Her name is Kim. At Jacksonville, we decided to do that very thing. I went to the elders and I said, brethren, instead of giving out food all the time, I said, I got a proposal. Why don't we require them to come to church and then we'll take them to get the food? And they said, we like it. And so Kim calls and she needs help. And so Miss Deborah Rice, you remember Deborah Eric, sweet lady. She's gone on to her reward. She picks up the phone and it's Kim. Hello, my name's Kim Bullock, and I need a church, and I need some help. Well, that's wonderful. And what do you need, Miss Kim? Well, I could use a little food. Well, Miss Kim, we love to give people food. Miss Kim, we'll be glad to help. Oh, I'm so glad. And Miss Kim said, when can you help me? And Miss Deborah, Sister Deborah said, Sunday morning at 9:30, and we can't wait to meet you. And she said, well, I don't know if I can get there at 9:30 in the morning. That's just kind of early for me. Don't worry, we do it again at 10:30. Well, I don't know. Sunday mornings just aren't for me. Don't worry, we do it again at 6 o'clock, and we can't wait to meet you. Now, Sundays are out for me. The weekends are not good. Don't worry, we do it again on Wednesday night at 7 o'clock, and we can't wait. Oh, I don't have a car. We'll pick you up. Keno Shrum Kawita. He told me, Rob, when you said that at Kawita, I laughed. You remember that? He said that'd never work. He said, what you just said will never work. Ask Keno if it works. The very next week, they implemented it. Well, Kim Bullock, she shows up at church because Deborah picks her up. We get to know her. We take her out to eat. We get her food, and we develop a friendship. And eventually we help her move into another little apartment complex. And the men of the church, I remember we all showed up with our trucks and trailers, and we're moving stuff in. And Nicole and I are sitting on the couch with Miss Kim and just talking to her as the men are bringing everything. And I have her right where I want her. I said, Miss Kim, I said, I got a question for you. What do you think about the Jacksonville Church of Christ? Oh, nice church. Never seen so many nice people before. I bet so. Miss Kim, do you know a lot about the Jacksonville Church of Christ? I really don't know a lot about y'all, but you're the nicest people I've ever met. Number 3. Miss Kim, would you like to know more about us? She said, I really would. Don't worry, Miss Kim, because I just so happen to have these little booklets. And we started the Bible study, and guess what we did? By the way, she's now a member of the Glencoe Church of Christ. It's amazing what happens when you turn your church inward, or turn your church outward instead of inward. And we start trying to study the Bible with people. Number 5, we need to make contacts, lots of them. And that's what we're doing this week. We've already made hundreds of contacts in this community. People said, I'd like to know more about the church. I don't have a church home. I've been needing to go to church. I'd like to know more about the Alkire. I've heard of your church. Y'all do that clothing or that drive, don't you? Yes, ma'am. Well, I'd like to know more about it. I just moved here and I haven't picked a church yet. Or as Sean, the hotel worker that lives right here in Grove City, said, I moved here I've been needing to go. That sounds like something I need to do. And then him and his wife talked to Nikki again. Then they talked to her today. And she says, I need to study my Bible. And he says, why not tomorrow night at 5 o'clock? But it doesn't work. It doesn't work. 6,000 baptisms later, and it's hard to argue with that. In fact, we're at 6,400 baptisms right now. Did you realize last week that we had 7 baptisms average per day? There were 49 baptisms just last week. That's not in India. That's not in Honduras. It's not in Costa Rica. It's in the United States of America. We've got to learn how to make contact. Make your target list. So who's on your list? Who is it that you're trying to win to Christ? So I'm being specific. So I want you to answer this question to yourself. Who is it right now that I'm trying to bring to Christ? What's their name? How many do you have on your list? Do you have anybody on your list? Is there one person right now that you're really making a concerted effort? Because my father taught me when I remember when he brought out that 22 pump, and I was going to get to fire my first rifle. I still remember that, you know. You never hit a target you don't aim at. You know, one of the problems we're facing, we never hit targets we don't aim at. We're not aiming at anybody. And if we don't have a target list, I guarantee there's no one that's going to be converted. And so we got to start with making a target list. And so here it is. It's Alyssa and Ryan and John and Trey. That's why they're up here. That's the whole reason we put them here. Because we want to see who they are. We want to know that there are people that need the gospel. And so make your list. Promote your church. Advertise. Let people know you're here. That's what House to House, Heart to Heart does. It's a great magazine. It promotes. Make sure you use it correctly. Make sure you got information on there that can be accessed. And when people call the phone number, it actually reaches a human being. And make sure that you keep sending it into mailboxes, because that's how people will know you're here. If advertisement did not work, Walmart would not do it. They don't waste money. I got home from a trip, and I've been in Texas. My family had been gone for 3 weeks. I walked into Jacksonville, and I noticed as I got into the church building, there was a couple sitting in the back right-hand side. I was sitting towards the front. Alan Webster, I think y'all just had him didn't y'all have him for a meeting just recently, Alan Webster? Okay, he's a good friend. He was preaching, and he finished his sermon, and he walks down the aisle. Well, I walked with him, and I said, "Hey, Alan, who's that couple right there?" He said, "Rob, I don't know. It's visitors." I said, "Yes." So I went and sit behind him, incognito, of course. And so the closing prayer was said, and they popped up, and they turned around. There I was. And I said, "Ma'am?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "I'm Rob Whitacre, and I'm a member. Are you visiting?" She said, "I am. My name's Ellen." I said, "Ellen, it's nice to meet you." I said, "Ellen, are you visiting for the first?" She said, "I am." I said, "Do you live close?" She says, "I do. I just live down the road." I said, "Great." I said, "Ellen, what'd you think of the church service?" She said, I really like that preacher. He sure does love the Bible." That was her quote. I said, "Well, Ellen loves the Bible." And she said, "Well, I like that." I said, "Ellen, you by yourself?" Well, my husband was a little ill. He was coming with me, but he got sick. And I said, "Well, it's too bad. I would have loved to meet your husband." She said, "You know what?" She says, "I want him to hear that, preacher." She said, "Do y'all have an evening service?" Glad we weren't closed. I don't know why in the world churches of Christ are closing down their worship services. You will not become more faithful by having less worship. Doesn't matter to me what time you have it, but we need to worship as much as we can. I know churches right now, they are now down to 1 hour a week. 1 hour. No more Wednesday night, no more Sunday afternoon, Sunday night, and let's just not even do the Bible class. Brethren, I do not know how we're going to be more faithful by doesn't Romans 10:17 say, "So then faith comes by hearing and hearing"? I would suggest we need more worship, not less. That's just an observation. So Ellen says, "I'm going to bring my husband tonight." She said, "I'll bring him." I said, "Great." She did. They sat, so my wife and I sat right next to him after service. I said, "Well, Ellen, this is my husband, Perry." So Perry and I were talking. I said, "We got a little custom here at this church. Now I'm going to test you. Y'all ready for your test?" What's my little custom? What is it, Jim? See, he's paying attention. That's why he's an elder. And so he said, "I'm going to take him out to eat." I said, "Hey guys, I tell you what, we'd love to take you out to eat." And I said, "Perry, what's your favorite restaurant?" He said, "Athena's." Athena's. I said, "Ooh, wow." I said, "Well, Perry," I said it. "Perry, I'll take you to Athena's." His response, "You'll take me to Athena's?" I said, "Why not?" He said, "Wow." He said, "I'm not going to miss that." He said, "But he said, I'm feeling a little squeamish tonight." He said, "Can I take a rain check until Tuesday?" I said, "Sure, Perry. Rather than it will take me until Tuesday to pay for this meal." And I said, by the way, I don't ask them what their favorite restaurant is anymore. They go to Zaxby's. And so we're not going back to Athena's. It's not happening. And so anyway, we showed up at Athena's on Tuesday night, right? And we sit down in the restaurant. We had a reservation. And so, brethren, I could care less about the lasagna. I just don't care. I have one mission in this meal. So I'm going to begin with my introductory questions. You wrote those down on Sunday. First question. "Hey, Perry, where are you from?" He says, local area. We talk about it. Perry, what do you do for a living? Pest control. Perry, number 3, what do you enjoy doing? That was the sweet spot question. He said, man, I love sports. I love to watch sports. I said, I do too. Perry, I love sports. I said, great. I said, I coached for 10 years in high school. He said, great. I said, Perry, what sport do you like? NFL, football? He said, no, disrespectful. I don't watch them anymore. I said, okay, disrespectful. I don't either. I said, Perry, do you like basketball? No, bunch of thugs. I don't watch that NBA. I said, okay, thugs, no NBA, no NBA. Whatever he says, it doesn't matter to me. Perry, do you like baseball? No, just slow. I don't know how. Perry, what do you watch? He said, Rob, it's all into college. He said, Rob, you got to watch the college. That's the pure sport. That's what he told me. I said, great, college. I said, what team do you root for? He said, go Alabama. Go Alabama. If I got to like Alabama football to get a Bible study, so be it. I don't care. I want a Bible study. I said, all right, Perry. So now we're going to talk about Alabama football. He said, boy, I said, so I got to think about it. Nick Saban. Nick Saban's a great coach. I said, man, you got a great coach, Perry. He said, yeah. He said, man, Rob, we got a big statue of old Nick Saban. I got a picture next to him right in front of the arena. I said, I know. We call that idolatry. No, I did not say that. I did not say that. And so we talk about Alabama football. And then after we talk about Alabama football, I said, Perry, Monday is the national championship game. He said, yeah. I said, Perry, I'm sorry Alabama didn't make it. He said, yeah, I know they got cheated. I said, well, I think it was Ohio State. Y'all made it. and I said, well, Perry, why don't you come to the house? We'll watch it. He said, yeah. I said, we just so happen to have a football party going on tomorrow night. What in the world was that? That was my wife kicking me. She did not know about this party. And so I said, yes, come on over. And so sure enough, my wife did ask me who was coming. I said, just Perry and Ellen. And she said, what am I cooking for this party? I said, minor details. And so we picked up some stuff. We brought it to the house. They came over. I have one mission. There's just one thing I want. I will get it. We're sitting there watching that football game. It's a blowout. And I kind of halftime, we turned it down. I said, hey, Perry. I said, why did you come visit the Jacksonville Church of Christ? I'm just curious. You know what his answer? Listen to this. 21 years ago, you guys sent us house to house, heart to heart. You send it every month. He said, I love reading it. He said, it's all about the Bible. He said, Rob, I'll be honest with you. The church we've been attending doesn't follow the Bible anymore. And we're looking for a church that does. If you can't baptize that couple, you just need to quit and go home. I said, well, Perry, you know what? I just so happen to have these little booklets. And we started the Bible study, and 3 weeks later, we baptized. You got to promote your events. You got to have events. You need events, things that bring people. And it's important that a church reaches out to the community and has these opportunities where you can meet your local, this like Friday, this barbecue. That's an event. We're trying to bring people so we can meet them. And so we advertise different things that are going on. We solicit, hey, if you would like a track, if you'd like a video, just tell us. And sure enough, Deborah Rice calls me. She says, hey, Rob, I just got a request for some marriage material from a woman by the name of Brenda. I said, okay. Rob, we normally mail the material. Should I mail it? I said, oh, no. I said, we're going to hand deliver it. She said, but Rob, we always mail it. And I said, that's why we don't baptize. I said, I want to meet them personally. I said, Brenda, just put the address in my box. She said, okay. And so my wife and I grabbed that address. We went looking for Brenda, and we finally found her. Always bring a woman. It opened the door. So they see Nicole. They open the door. I step in. I said, ma'am, my name is Rob. And my wife, Nicole, you Brenda? Yes. I said, Brenda, you requested some marriage material. Oh, I did. I said, yes, ma'am. I said, ma'am, have you just got married? Oh, I have. I said, wonderful. I said, who's the lucky man? His name is Daniel. And I said, well. I said, Brenda, where are you from? She said, I'm from Oxford, just down south. And she said, I've moved up here. My husband's working in the lawn care industry, and I'm a sitter. And I said, is your husband home? I mean, she just seen her face. She made this really disgusted face. She looks over at her husband sleeping on the couch, and then she looked at me, yes. And her whole demeanor changed. And I said, oh, we need marriage material. And I said, well, ma'am, what's wrong? He said, well, She says, ever since we moved here, every time that man comes home, he gets on the couch and he goes to sleep. He said, I just want to talk to the man. Why can't he talk to me? And I said, well, I don't know. He probably works hard, Brenda. And she said, well, he probably does. I said, Brenda, you're new to this area. Is there anything you might need in this community? She said, yes. She said, we could use a church home. I said, okay. I said, yes. I said, church. I said, I happen to know where. She said, well, good. She said, I said, there's a church right across the street from the college right there. It's called the Jacksonville Church. She said, well, wonderful. She said, sir, before you leave, I've got one more question for you. I said, sure. She said, sir, do you happen to know anything about the Bible? I said, yes, ma'am, I know a little bit about the Bible. Good, because my husband knows nothing about the Bible. She said, you stay right there. I mean, brother, I wish I could have recorded this situation. She walks over to her husband. Now, her husband is on the couch, right? And this is what she did to her husband. She goes like this, Daniel, get up. And Daniel's doing it. Daniel, we've got guests, Daniel. Daniel gets up. She pulls him to the front door. And then, brother, I'm not exaggerating this part. This is exactly what happened. So my wife is here, I'm here, and she's got this finger like this. She says, Daniel, we're going to teach you the Bible. Now, brethren, you know what happens when you do that? You baptize him. That's what you do. I said, Miss Brenda, I said, my wife will bring the cookies and we can start tomorrow. You know, from that one knock on the door, we baptized Daniel, we baptized Brenda, we baptized, well, let me see. How many was it? 7? 7 of them? From one knock on the door. I wonder, Sean, how many will baptize because of that study you're going to do tomorrow night, you and John. I just wonder. I bet it's more than one. Because she's got family and friends. And once you get one, you're going to get 2. Once you get 2, you get 3. It's amazing what happens when we evangelize. We got to learn how to knock doors. Well, we're doing that this week. And I guess what we're learning is that door knocking's not so bad, is it? I guess we thought it wouldn't work. We thought, well, you're not going to get anybody knocking doors. Do I have to say anything more? In Granbury Street, Texas, that was our percentage every day. That's what we hit. Austin, what was their percentage on Sunday? What was it? 29%. Our percentages are usually pretty close. What was it on Monday? 21. It's amazing how close. Tuesday it was 19. And they got 20. And they got 19. The percentages are always really close. We've got this down to a science. We know pretty much what you're going to hit. You know, when I used to knock doors, you know what before I was trained, before I learned how to do this, you know what my percentage was? It's like 1%. I remember when Keno went to Coweta, and he said, Rob, I get everything you're doing, but he said, that door knocking, it don't work. Keno, would you like to tell him what happened when we taught that church how to door knock? Just stand up and tell him. I'll let an elder speak to you. What happened when you learned how?
So, Rob came and he was supposed to go that week at the end of our advanced seminar. He was supposed to go that next day on Saturday to Lawton, about 3 hours south. And it was a national door knocking that we were doing out of the house. I said, Rob, would you stick around and knock doors with us in the morning? You don't have to be a lot for that evening, so we can stay and knock doors. And he said, I will. And I said, well, will you teach us how to do it? Because honestly, we have never had a single solitary response for door knocking. None. In all the years we've done door knocking. And he said, Keno, what do you do when you knock the door? I said, well, I go up and knock on the door and I say, hi, I'm Keno, this is my wife Jamie, and we'd just like to invite you to come worship with us. Or I might say, hi, I'm Keno, this is my wife Jamie, would you like to have a Bible study? He said, how many times does that work? I said, that never work. Rob said, if I was going to teach somebody what not to say when they knock doors, I'd tell them everything you just said. I said, well, train us how to do it. He did. The next morning we had a little training deal like we've been doing here. We went out and knocked doors, and we were right 31% that day. And we ended up 3 weeks later baptizing 2 people off that door knocking. So it worked. When you know what you're doing, it works.
I thought you'd rather hear from somebody else than me. And he's not the only one that can tell that story in this church right now. Because there are others that we've trained how to do this, and it works. You got to be trained. We're going to learn how to use new movers. We're about to go help make new mover baskets. And in fact, we need everybody. So we got to make a lot of these. And we're going to do it in the fellowship hall. And it's exciting. And that new mover is important because, by the way, let's go back and look at that chart. Did anybody see anything unusual about Thursday? What's the number? 83. That's new movers. We normally are somewhere around 75-80% with new movers. That means 75 to 80% of the time when we get a person on the other side of the door and we give them a new mover basket, we make a contact out of them. So we need to learn how to do new movers. These are people who don't have church homes. Let me quote David Shannon, President Fred Hardman. People are most likely to change churches when they move. A couple of generations ago, if a couple or a family or an individual moved from one place to another place, they usually stayed in that same denomination. Those days are over. It doesn't matter to me what church they were a member of in the last town. Your average person today is willing to look at any church in their neighborhood. This is a powerful opportunity for evangelism. It doesn't matter to me what church they were part of in the last town. I want them to visit a church of Christ because it gives us the best opportunity to sit down and study the Word of God. Tomorrow, if you'll come help us, 75 to 80% of the people you talk to become a contact. Now, brother, if that doesn't stir your spirit, you're already dead. If that doesn't get you out of the couch and get you out of the house, there's nothing I can do that will. I'm almost guaranteed. That's almost guaranteed success. Let's write cards. I want to commend the older members of this church. Some of you are older. You can't walk. You can't go door to door. We get it. But you know what? All the contacts we make, if we don't send cards and reach out to them and love them, it stops right there. But every morning, this church has 25, 30 of their older members, retirees, and not all, but many of them, and they come back to this church, they write cards. We got 1,500 cards written so far. Why do we send cards? Because that happens. My wife and I got back from a trip. Homer Smith called me and said, "Hey, Rob, we've got this lady, and we've been sending her cards while you've been gone, and I think she's ready." And what that means is we got to go visit. So my wife and I went over to the house, knocked on the door. She opens it up and she says, "Hello." I said, "Well, my name's Rob, my wife Nicole. We're from the Jacksonville." Well, she said, "I love that church. Y'all come on in." She invites us in her house on the spot. We walk inside the house and she said, "Now, who'd you say you were again?" My wife said, "Nicole Whitacre." "Nicole, that's your card right there." She knew where her card was. You know why? She's lonely and she reads them every day. She had cards all over her apartment because we send 2 to 3 cards every day for 3 weeks. She's going to get 40 or 50 cards. She had like 47 cards sitting there. And so here's Miss Bettina, and we're talking to her. She's so sweet. I said, "Miss Bettina, I got a question for you." I said, "What do you think about the Jacksonville Church of Christ?" She says, "I like it. Nice church. I mean, they send me these cards. They're so nice to me. I visited." And I said, "Well, good." I said, "Miss Bettina, do you know a lot about the Jacksonville Church?" She says, "I really don't know a lot about you." I said, "Well, would you like to know more about us?" She said, "I kind of would. I just so happen to have these little booklets." That little booklet is sitting right there on her desk, and we did the Bible study. I remember we were 3 weeks later in book number 3. We got to Mark 16:16. I'll close with this story. And I said, "Bettina, would you read Mark 16:16? She says, "I already know what it says." I said, "You do?" She said, "My pastor told me exactly what it says." I bet he did. I said, "Well, just read it." She said, "Well, he that believes is saved and then baptized." I've never heard that version before. And I said, "Bettina, would you read it again?" She said, "Well, of course. He that believes is saved and then baptized." At that point, I picked her Bible up and she said, "Am I doing something wrong?" I said, "Well, King James." I said, "Bettina, let's try that again." I said, "Let's read it one word at a time." That's what she said. "He that believes and is baptized shall be." Well, that's not what my pastor told me that verse said. I bet not. The last thing your pastor wants you to do is read the Bible. How many more stories do I have to tell you? How many more pictures do you have to see? You're experiencing it right now this week, brothers. You're experiencing it together.